I was raised a very good Protestant. Let me put it that way. Even though it was varieties of Protestants, it was very good. You know, whether it was Methodist or First Church of God or Mennonite or whatever, we were a good practicing Protestant family. But I was also a book nerd and I loved to read. And I think that's what really was like the turning point for me. I had just made my baptism in the First Church of God after having the Catechism of Billy Graham. I aced it. It was wonderful. 2 months later, I came across a book called The Song of Bernadette, which is the story of Our Lady of Lourdes and Saint Bernadette. And it was a real eye-opener for me because I never had read a life of a saint. I didn't know Mary apart from like the nativity that she's often seen in the nativity, but I didn't know anything beyond that. So this was addictive. And I went back to the public library looking for more books, exhausted it after maybe half a dozen titles, went looking for more. And that's how we found the Daughters of St. Paul in Philadelphia, who had a bookstore there on South Broad Street. And I went in with my girlfriend, Chris, and came out with a stack of books. But the sister, when she checked us out, she saw that we had Lives of the Saints, prayer books, Blessed Mother books. And she saw two young girls, 13 years old. She said, "So have you ever thought of becoming a sister?" And I said, "No, I've not really given it much thought." I said, "But you have to be Catholic to do that, right?" "I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant." So she went back in the room and came and returned with a catechism. And I said, "Well, what's this?" She goes, "Well, this will explain a lot." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." So on the ride back to Lancaster, which was like an hour-long ride, my friend and I were looking at this book, passing it back and forth. And I said, "Chris, you got to look at this. In the back of this book, it has all of these different Protestant denominations, even my own." I said, "And it tells you the founder, the country, the year it was started." And it's right. I said, "But look at the Catholics." I said, "The Catholics say that their church was founded by Jesus Christ in the year 33 AD. I said, "Read that again. Are you sure that's right?" And I said, "Well, who would want to belong to a different church then?" I said, "If Jesus Christ founded the Catholic Church, what are we doing in this other church?" So that was like the first part. A couple pages later, I said, "Well, what's this big long list of names and dates?" And we read it, and she said, "Well, look, it starts with St. Peter. He's the one in the gospel, and it ends with Paul VI. It's all these popes." So from like the beginning of apostolic times, during the time of Jesus, the apostles, all the way to the present day, I say they have an uninterrupted line of succession. And I said, so no other church can claim that. So I think on that ride home to Lancaster, it was like an hour-long ride. By the time we got back home, we were convinced that we had to look into it further. And also, a lot of the Lives of the Saints we were reading were actually stained glass windows in the Sacred Heart Church across the street from us. It was a very simple equation for us. We're reading about, Jesus founded the church. These saints were reading about, go to this church. The line of succession goes back to St. Peter. Okay, we were only 13. We didn't know theology. I mean, really, I couldn't read Thomas Aquinas, but that was enough. And that's what really got us started, with our journey into the church. And when I asked my dad, could I become Catholic? Because my mother said, "Well, ask your father," the typical response, right? So I asked Dad, he said, no. He said, "Because knowing you, that's not going to be enough. The next thing I know, you're going to tell me you want to become a nun." And I really hesitated to say anything because pretty much that's what I was thinking. Because I had read the books and I was really interested in both, but you can't do one before the other. So, but little by little, the tide finally turned when my grandmother had become Catholic over the last couple months, unbeknownst to my mother. She was raised nothing. Her mother was no particular faith at all, but she had taken a job as a cleaning lady at Old St. Mary's Parish and was so impressed with the priest. She took instructions. And then when she found out I was interested in the faith, she told my mother, "Well, I don't see what the problem is. I'm Catholic." My mother was blown away. But she came back with that information. So then I ended up being allowed to go to church with my grandmother, who was only Catholic less than a year. And she died 2 weeks before my first communion, in January 1st. But it was long enough to see me like settled and then on the way. And then she passed away. But I said that was such a grace to have my grandmother, the non-religious grandmother, become Catholic just the very last year of her life. And that's really what changed it for me, because my parents at that time told me, you can do what you want when you're 18. And I was only 13. So I said, but you want me to waste 5 years of my life when I know that this is what I want to do. And then when I heard about my other grandmother becoming Catholic, that's what really kind of turned the tide. And so I became Catholic. And then I entered the Daughters of St. Paul 3 years later. I was, like my dad had anticipated, I was discerning a religious vocation even before I became Catholic. And I had looked at different orders, but the one I kept being drawn to was the Daughters of St. Paul. And I said, part of that is really divine providence. Of all the religious orders I could have entered, and there's a lot of them, our mission is to use the modern means of the technology, media, communication in order to, evangelize. And so the way that I was converted through reading Lives of the Saints, through reading books on the faith, is the exact same type of ministry that God was calling me to use that, communicating beauty, truth, the words of the gospel through books, media, music, art, to do that as my ministry. So first, God, he kind of hooked me into the faith through the Lives of the Saints and the Blessed Mother, and then he sent me off to do the same thing.